Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please hit that subscribe button. Also, consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amount given the link in the description box. Let me welcome our guest tonight, Ambassador Chas Freeman. Ambassador Freeman is a former American diplomat, an author, and a geopolitical analyst. Ambassador Freeman, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you, Jodish. Glad to be with you. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, we had you on last time. It was about 10 days, if I'm not wrong. And you said that war is inevitable. But towards the end, you also said you wished we could meet and talk about something else because it's so depressing. But unfortunately, I had to send you another email saying that I want to talk to you again. So if you could give us your assessment of what happened in the last 8 days or so insofar as the conflict.
Yeah, well, let me describe what I think is happening. Basically, December 29th, there was a meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's club in Florida. And at that meeting, they agreed on an attack on Iran. Therefore, the negotiations, which took place in January and February, were a sham. They were cover, again, for the marshaling of forces to mount the attack that finally was mounted on February 28th. The attack is in pursuit of Israeli strategy. There is no American strategy. There is an American campaign plan to implement the Israeli strategy. The aim of the Israeli strategy is to devastate Iran, to eliminate it as a competitor for influence in West Asia, and thereby facilitate the greater Israel project, which envisages everything from the Euphrates to the Nile becoming a Jewish managed state, presumably an apartheid state, as Israel itself is. So that's the theory. That's the strategy. It's part of a long-term plan. Prime Minister Netanyahu has openly admitted that he's had this fever dream of finding an American president willing to do his way for 40 years. And in Donald Trump, he's found that man. The campaign plan on the U.S. side really involves a very intensive set of strikes on Iran, on multiple targets in Iran, with a view to destroying Iran's capacity to conduct a war with Israel. Now, that campaign plan, in my view, is failing for the simple reason that the Iranians have spent 20 years preparing for an air campaign against them. When they think they're about to be attacked, they relocate the sensitive materials or equipment that might be destroyed in an attack to hiding places. Now, let me talk about the Iranian strategy, because they do have a strategy. First point is that they are sick and tired of continual provocations, assassinations, attacks, negotiations that are cover for surprise attacks, and they're going for broke. They are following a strategy that will not stop until they reach their objective, which is to devastate Israel. In other words, having received an existential threat from Israel, they now pose an existential threat to Israel. And I used to chair a group in Washington that called the Committee for the Republic, and they have awkwardly decided this is the precise moment to get me back, I guess. Anyway, you can cut all that out, I hope. Let me go back. So the Iranian strategy is basically modeled on Muhammad Ali's strategy called rope-a-dope. That is, take all the punishment you can, behave, if you will, like Afghanistan or or Vietnam, and bide your time, hide your capabilities until the other side is sufficiently exhausted so that you can deliver a knockout punch. Here we see a familiar pattern from the June war of 2025, namely, Iran has begun the war by expending its least advanced ammunition in an effort to deplete the intercept capability and the defense capability of Israel and the United States. And if the June war is any guide, about 10 or 12 days into this, Israel will in fact have exhausted its capacity to defend itself. Shortly after that, the US will run out of munitions. Why? Because every intercept attempt involves at least 2 or 3, and sometimes as many as a dozen or more interceptors being fired, each one very expensive and each one in short supply. So the inventory of interception capabilities is rapidly depleting. The United States is beginning to cannibalize systems in South Korea, THAAD, Patriot, and in Japan in order to supplement the dwindling logistical support for this war in West Asia. So Iran has not even begun to use its hypersonic weaponry, which remains underground in storage, waiting for the right moment. Let me talk about the most important development today, which is that President Pezeshkian of Iran, on behalf of the 3-man governing council that has replaced the slain Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, has apologized to the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman, for attacks on them. And he's claimed that this was because Iran deliberately decentralized its military command after the attack on the Supreme Leader, and that people were conducting unauthorized attacks. That is not true, but it is a very deft way of giving an excuse to the Gulf Arabs that they need in order to meet Pezeshkian's conditions. During the time, the war opened on Saturday about 1 a.m. with an attack on the Supreme Leader by the Israeli Air Force. It was immediately responded to by Iran, which knocked out most of the radar systems and other equipment that the U.S. had deployed to the region. There is some evidence that all 5 THAAD radars, theater high altitude air defense radars, were destroyed. A $1.1 billion radar in Al-Udeid in Qatar was destroyed or severely damaged. They not only knocked out the eyes and ears of the United States in the region, but at least one of those installations was aimed at China and Russia. So the United States has been decisively weakened in those terms. The American bases became militarily inoperable. The personnel were evacuated to hotels. Iran then followed up by attacking the hotels. So what is going on here is a very deliberate strategy combining diplomacy with force to convince the Gulf Arabs that they cannot afford to have American bases on their territory, that far from defending them, these bases make them vulnerable to attack. And Iran has gone farther. It has openly threatened to destroy their oil production and gas production capabilities. It has closed the Strait of Hormuz. I'll come back to that. But alongside the military attacks, although I'm now speculating, there must have been a very intense dialogue between the various GCC capitals, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuwait, and so on, and the Iranians, about Iran's terms for calling off the attack. So they have now called off the attacks on the condition that none of these bases be used against them. Donald Trump has said this is an Iranian surrender to the Gulf Arabs. It's not at all. What it is a ceasefire, and it probably includes, now again I'm speculating, an undertaking by the Gulf Arabs not only to prevent American use of these facilities against Iran, but after the war is over, which will be determined, I think, by Iran, not by Israel or the United States, to remove those bases. So Iran is achieving a long-term objective that it has had of removing the American military presence from the Gulf. That's my interpretation of this. Only time will tell whether that interpretation is correct or not. But I think Occam's razor, the simplest explanation for what has happened, usually is the best, suggests that this is what happened. Now, this Gulf of the Strait of Hormuz has been closed. It has been closed it was not closed by naval forces. The Iranian Navy appears mostly to have been sunk, including one Iranian cruiser that was participating in a multinational exercise with India that was sunk off Sri Lanka by an American submarine, despite the fact that I believe the American Navy was also involved in this multinational exercise. So this was a war crime, not a unjustified, but it has the effect of legitimizing Iranian globalization of the war. That is, it need no longer be constrained to the region. It's very dangerous for that reason. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is closed on the model of the Houthi closure of the Red Sea. That was the first successful sea blockade conducted from the land. Iran has spent 20 years preparing the land-based closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And while Donald Trump has directed the International Development Finance Corporation of the United States to step in to provide insurance, now that insurance is not available from other sources, they don't have the legal authority or the funds to do that. So I suspect this is an empty gesture, although they are in discussion with insurance companies. Second, he's ordered the U.S. Navy to escort any tankers that are brave enough to try to run the blockade. But I think the U.S. Navy lacks both the ships and the capability to do that against land-based missiles and artillery, which cover the strait from the Iranian earth. So this is not the short, victorious war that Donald Trump imagined. He has cited multiple objectives, some of them self-contradictory. There is no clear explanation for this war. Some say it's to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, but we killed the supreme leader, who was the only cork in the bottle on that issue. Everyone else in Iran below him appears to have decided that there must be a nuclear weapon for deterrent purposes, and look to the example of North Korea, which responded to maximum pressure by developing an ICBM with multiple reentry vehicles, nuclear and decoys that can strike anywhere in the United States. That's probably the next stage in Iran. Anyway, Iran now has the obstacle to Iran making a decision to build a nuclear weapon has been removed, both because the supreme leader who opposed it has been murdered and because the fatwa that prevented Iran from building a nuclear weapon made an exception when there was an existential challenge to the Islamic Republic, which there now is, explicitly. A second objective, supposedly, was to counter Iranian missile capabilities against Israel. And here there's been a very convoluted argument. on the eve of the Israeli attack, backed by the United States. This is an Israeli-American war, not an American-Israeli war. I mean, the prime mover is Israel, and Iran knows that, which is why it is focused on wreaking havoc in Israel, and I'll come to that. This war, before it was started, there were people in Washington arguing that we should encourage the Israelis to go first, because then we can argue that we're responding defensively to a threat of actual Iranian retaliation. That convoluted argument found expression in Marco Rubio, and then a day later he had to do a 180-degree turn and say, no, because Donald Trump said, no, Israel didn't start this war, I did. I take credit for it. And so we see American officials behaving like Soviet apparatchiks in the Soviet era, turning pretzel logics into pretzel-like convolutions and reversing themselves at a moment's notice quite shamelessly. And one wonders whether the end result will not be, for Mr. Rubio, what Molotov, the Soviet foreign minister, suffered, namely reassignment to a hydroelectric project in Outer Mongolia. Perhaps Mr. Rubio will end up running a lemonade stand in Tijuana or perhaps San Diego. Anyway, in the middle of all this, I should add, the Trump administration is threatening the Cuban government with annihilation. So there's a certain consistency here. The savagery of the newly renamed Department of War is much at evidence. Let me turn finally to the issue of what is happening in Israel. First, let us acknowledge Israeli military censorship is very effective. It's effective not only because it is applied strenuously to people in Israel, but also because the Zionist-oriented American media respect it. So when Israel says something, they just dutifully repeat it. When that is challenged, they say, well, we can't verify that. So we know very little in the mainstream media about what is happening in Israel. There is an interesting clip from an Indian journalist, Braj Mohan, who just posted this on X, which indicates what other sources are saying, namely, the interception of incoming Iranian missiles is failing. The damage is extensive. And I recall that in the June war, 408 buildings were destroyed in Israel. Many Israelis are still homeless as a result of that. This now is much worse. Mr. Mohan is quite panicky in his little clip. He clearly has been renewed his done puja. He's got a nice red mark on his between his eyes. India is in a very poor position. It has almost no strategic petroleum reserve. I believe there's about 9.5 days supply in the Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserve, whereas China has 253 days of strategic petroleum reserve, and Japan and Korea quite a bit less, but still far more than India. So it's entirely natural that the Indian government has petitioned the United States for an exemption from the Russian oil embargo that the United States had imposed. And the Russian Federation has offered to resupply India with oil, which it will have to do via the Pacific or around Africa, because India's going to suffer power outages. The one that you just experienced is probably not related to that, but things are going to get pretty tough. Second effect is about half the world's fertilizer supply has just been cut off. In the Northern Hemisphere, this is right in advance of the planting season. So we're going to have a food shortage down the road. And if we look at the energy picture, Qatar has had to stop production of gas, both for export and domestically. I mean, for example, there's a Norwegian aluminum factory in Qatar that has had to shut down because no gas is available to power it. And the land-based facilities that produce liquefied natural gas in Qatar have been damaged. We're told it will be many weeks, perhaps months, before they can be brought back online. And so we're in a situation where the United States and Israel, following Israel, a long-term Israeli ambition, has started a war which is not going to be the short, victorious war that its proponents imagined, but a long war of attrition in which industrial capacity and inventory of weaponry and defensive equipment will decide the outcome, along with the ability to take punishment. Again, Muhammad Ali and rope-a-dope. I'll take all the punches you give me. I'll punch you enough to exhaust you. And when you are exhausted, I will strike you. And that is the Iranian strategy. And, of course, it may not work, but at the moment it appears to be working. And so I think the mainstream media and the boastful statements of the Central Command must be taken not with a grain of salt, but a boulder of salt. So this is sort of a summary, I think, of what is happening, at least as I see it. And of course, I may be wrong because information is in very short supply. And I would point out we're only 7 or 8 days into this war. I guess it's 7.5, 8 days now. And it's going to go on for quite a while. And I think probably midweek next week, sometime around the 10th of March, the 11th to 12th, we will see whether I'm correct about the capacity of the United States and Israel to defend themselves against hypersonic missiles, which is almost non-existent anyway, is essentially eliminated. We're hearing talk out of the Pentagon about falling back to air-launched cruise missiles, that is standing off hundreds of miles and firing missiles at targets in Iran. But the assumption there is that the United States has wiped out Iranian air defenses. I think it's an open question whether it has or not, for two reasons. First, the Iranians, given the rope-a-dope strategy, may well have decided to save those by moving them underground out of the way and not expending their own self-defense capacity at the opening when Israeli and American capacities are at their peak. So they may be, these air defense capabilities may still exist to be brought forward when required or appropriate. Second, battle damage assessment in an air war is exceedingly difficult. I was reminded of a friend, the NATO American air campaign against Serbia in the war to vivisect Serbia and remove Kosovo from it. The Serbs had apparently 17 launchers for their air defenses, and we reported destroying 64 of those 17. So, I mean, and I remember from my time as ambassador during the Gulf War of 1990-91, that our Air Force and the Israeli Air Force were continuously announcing the destruction of Iranian Scud launchers, and then they turned out not to be destroyed. So we've seen videos of missiles launching from beneath the sands. That is, they are They are in silos covered with dirt and a very thin protector between them and the sky. And then suddenly they burst forth from an apparent empty desert. So I don't know whether, Iran is holding back appropriate things. I suspect it may be.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about President Pezeshkian's decision or announcement to halt strikes at the Gulf states, uh, conditional, conditioned on that no
Yes.
attacks are coming, no further attacks were to come from them again. I wonder what makes them take this decision. I mean, of course, on one hand, as you said, it's a strategy of attacking U.S. and Iran while opening diplomacy to the rest of the states in the region. But one may also wonder what makes them hope that the Gulf states are independent enough to take open friendship or push the United States out of the region.
Well, the basic lesson that they're trying to impart, I think, has justified in the name of defending the Gulf states against Iran or other attackers. In fact, don't do that. They justify Iranian attacks on these very states. So they are not a source of protection, but of vulnerability, and they therefore should be removed. That's the basic lesson Iran has been trying to draw home. There are two possible reasons that I see for the timing of the ceasefire, unilateral ceasefire announced by Iran against these states, not against the United States. Iran has made it clear it's going to continue to attack Israel and the United States, but it has now exempted the Gulf states and done so in a tactful, apologetic manner that maximizes the chances that they will accept the ceasefire. In other words, Pezeshkian says, we're really sorry. This was all a mistake. Of course, it wasn't a mistake, but he gives them the out of accepting that it was a mistake. So two possibilities. One, there were agreements reached to diplomacy, which is not visible, between the Gulf states and Iran. And the Gulf states agreed that, as they have said publicly, they would not allow any American use of their bases against Iran. And second, they probably also agreed that when the war is over, those bases will disappear. So Iran has achieved its longstanding objective. That is the most likely possibility. As a secondary consideration, Iran has expended mostly drones, very few missiles on these bases. And it may want to just save them for further use against the United States and Israel, having made its point, it believes, to the Gulf Arabs. So I think this is a very important development, and I don't think it is, as Donald Trump suggested, an Iranian surrender to the Gulf Arabs.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised about the announcement itself because my reading in the recent days has been Iran had been very, very cautious even while they were attacking. Even their attacks on hotels, they came
Yes.
out and justified saying that, oh, we only attacked the hotels because it was US personnel who had to retreat back to the hotels, effectively saying that we are still maintaining that difference or discrimination between attacking military
Right.
assets. And so I wasn't surprised by that, but
Right. But they attacked, for example, the port of Duqm in Oman, which is a purely Omani port, but it has all storage that the U.S. Navy draws on, and it's a U.S. Navy anchorage. So Oman, which has been the indispensable neutral mediator in these sham negotiations, Oman is, I think, aghast at having been used in this fashion twice. But the Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi has been very clear that there was real progress being made in the negotiations by the Iranians. They had gone well beyond the so-called JCPOA, or Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They had agreed to forego any storage of material that was substantially enriched, and they had agreed to go back to low levels of enrichment. And we've heard Steve Witkoff, who of course knows absolutely, he's a real estate manipulator. He's Donald Trump's crony. He knows nothing about nuclear weapons or Iran or the Arabs or anything else, and nor does Jared Kushner, who does not have a PhD in nuclear physics. Last time I looked, these people say, well, it's the inherent right, Witkoff says, it's the inherent right of President Trump to insist that they have no enrichment. But it's the inherent right of Iran under Article 4 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty to have enrichment. So once again, the United States is in contempt of international law and making assertions which have no basis at all in law and practice. So I think the Trump administration has thoroughly discredited itself abroad, not only with this unprovoked attack, but with Israel, but with the manner in which 65 people at a girls' school in Minab. Normally, one would expect an apology. This was a targeting error. We're really sorry. No, nothing. The sinking by a submarine of an Iranian cruiser that had been engaged in an essentially diplomatically organized multinational exercise off India, is another. This is like the German sinking of the Lusitania in World War I. It discredits the United States, and Secretary of Defense, self-styled Secretary of War, Hegseth's statements could well have been made by Adolf Hitler. They are totally savage. He dismisses so-called international institutions, he says, in so-called international law. He said there should be no rules of engagement, or no holds barred. Everything should, the objective is to destroy, murder, and erase Iranian power. So this is bad enough internationally, but domestically, we have a situation where Israeli impunity depends entirely on support from the United States, and that support is rapidly crumbling. The American public is not behind this war. Even some Republicans who normally behave like members of a Leninist party, falling in line with the great leader's judgments, are condemning this. There is a split in MAGA between those who favored restraint. Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene come to mind as the two most prominent spokespeople for this view, and warmongers like Lindsey Graham. So the basis, both for support for the continuation of the war and for MAGA and for President Trump, are all being rapidly eroded by this. And I think the effort or the statement that, Cuba is next is an effort to finesse this reality. I don't think it will succeed. So this is a disaster for the United States, for Israel, for Iran. Of course, Iran is being battered. And I guess I should say one final thing, and that is the preparation for this, for the regime change operation that this is. Some days Donald Trump admits that, sometimes he doesn't. Marco Rubio always seems to insist, except when he's told otherwise, that it is a regime change operation. The basis for this was very carefully prepared. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, brought down the Iranian currency. He says he did so, he takes credit for doing so, in order to produce protests by making Iranians so miserable that they would take to the streets. They did that. At that point, agents of influence who had been supplied with Starlink receivers to coordinate their actions without regard to the internet, 50,000 such receivers infiltrated into Iran. They went into action to try to ensure that the peaceful protests would become violent and evoke violence from the government, which they did. So Iran says 3,710 people, including both members of the police and the Basij, the volunteer militia, as well as members of the public, were killed. West has vastly exaggerated numbers. The truth is probably somewhere in between. I don't think we should expect the Iranian government to tell the truth any more than Western governments have been doing. This was the one of the justifications for the one that initially came out from Donald Trump was there's human rights violations in Iran, and we have to stop this, and we're coming to your rescue, which is nonsense, because coming to your rescue from the air by bombing you and making you even more miserable is not a good solution. Now, the final thing here is one of the things that Iran did with its closure of the Strait of Hormuz, of course, was to sever the revenues from oil and gas of all the producers in the Gulf. Some, like Saudi Arabia, are very close to fiscal emergency. Others, like Kuwait, basically live off coupon clipping on investments that they have made with previous profits from oil and gas. Bahrain is dependent on Saudi Arabia. Qatar is the third largest gas producer in the world. It's had to stop producing gas, as I mentioned. UAE is also bottled up in the Strait of Hormuz. Oman is not, but Oman is a very minor oil and gas producer. So the revenues of these countries have all been stopped. Iran has stopped its own revenues. And clearly it has made a calculation that it can do that for quite a while. I haven't seen any studies of how long that might be, but I'm sure the Iranians have made such studies and in preparation for this strategy. So we're looking at terrible pressure on governments in the Gulf, not just financial, because, of course, their populations, their native populations at least, and some of them have very small native populations, large populations of South Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Filipinos, and so forth. We're looking at native populations that have been turned almost 100% against Israel and the United States by the genocide in Gaza. So they're under pressure. These governments are already under pressure politically to dissociate themselves from the United States and Israel. Now there's fiscal pressure, revenue pressure on them as well. And they're not known for their courage. So we'll see what they decide. It's their decision. If I'm correct, they have made a decision and communicated it to Iran. But I might be wrong about that. So outside the region, we face reduced crops in the next harvest cycle, reduced supplies of petrochemicals and fertilizer, an increase in oil prices. Oil is now at about $94 a barrel and headed upward. I think it's going to hit 150 or more. This means that in the United States, which has a policy of trying to keep gasoline prices low, to benefit consumers and appease voters, that we're going to see the doubling of price of gas at the pump at a minimum. So we're going to have $4.50, $5 in much of the country, $7 or $8, maybe $9 in California. And as we go into midterm elections, assuming Donald Trump can't stop them, as he would like to do, the voters are not going to be in a good mood for. And this, therefore, could be the demise of MAGA and much of the Republican Party if the voters take their revenge. So this is an earthquake, and very high on the Richter scale.
This is probably first American war that is unpopular right from the beginning. Remind me if there was another.
I think it's the first war in which we have taken the level of damage to infrastructure and presence that we've already taken. In other words, we've been immune. We make war through proxies. And let me just mention the proxy impact on this, because it's also considerable. If the United States is focused on resupplying the stocks of Israel and itself, it is not going to be able to make those things available to the Europeans to transfer to Ukraine. So Ukraine has just suffered a strategic blow, which may be fatal. This is all an illustration, Jyotish, that before you start a war, you should set clear and feasible objectives. You should devote the resources necessary to achieve those objectives. You should try to achieve them in a way that does not do permanent damage to your reputation. And you should have a plan for terminating the war. We have no plan for terminating this war, and I don't think we're capable of doing it. Because, as I said at the outset, Iran is playing for keeps. They want to destroy Israel as a threat to them. Iran may have been a potential threat to Israel, but Israel is a very real threat to Iran. And Iran has every right under international law to retaliate against the attacks from American and other Western bases. And in this connection, I would just say the performance of the Europeans has been amazingly maladroit, ill-considered, and fatal to Europe's reputation. Someone like Sir Keir Starmer, who says, "Well, we're not going to support this war from Diego Garcia or Cyprus or the RAF bases in Britain," and then turns around and says, "No, we have to protect the Gulf Arabs from the unprovoked attack by Iran." I mean, Orwell would turn in his grave at this. And other statements. Macron saying, well, this should show Iran that it should negotiate in good faith, when it did negotiate in good faith and the United States did not. So I go back to the Soviet analogy.
Even the Europeans didn't. There was a snapback of the E3. The E3 invoked the snapback. Yeah.
Of course, but I don't know in what respect they are differentiated from the members of the Warsaw Pact under the Soviet Union, whenever the Soviet Union with it. So one day Hitler was the great monster, and then after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, no, we have to support the Soviet pact with Nazi Germany, and this is all correct. And then we get into the Cold War, and every time the Soviet Union changes course, does something really foolish like invading Afghanistan, everybody in the Warsaw Pact does what the U.S. Congress and the Europeans do, namely stand up and applaud. Have you lost the power again?
No. It's fine.
So I think we've probably exhausted this topic for now. It is, again, I know, less than 8 full days into this war, and much is uncertain. I've put forward various hypotheses about what is happening, but that's all they are. And we may find that I'm wrong. I don't believe so. I believe there is good reason to believe that the hypotheses I've stated are correct, but time will tell.
We'll leave it there, Ambassador Freeman. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Jyotish, and I hope the power stays on in Delhi.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.